Hey, good afternoon and good morning. It's December 10th, and welcome to the Security Weekly show on data care. I'm Ron Gula, and this is Cyndi Gula.
I'm Cyndi Gula, not to be confused.
Yeah, today we're going to talk to you about a concept that we want to expand the tent, expand the concept of cybersecurity to something called data care. And, we've got some opinions on this, but before you listen to our opinions, you should probably talk a little bit about who we are. So, Cyndi, how'd you get started in cybersecurity?
So my degree is in glass engineering science. So my background is engineering. And one day Ron came home from work and said, "Hey, I got an idea for a company." And my engineering background gave me a lot of the tools that I needed in order to figure out how to build the company. And pretty much everything I've learned about cybersecurity has been through osmosis. So again, I programmed in Fortran and Pascal, so I know how difficult it is, and I also know that I don't like to code. However, I can understand it, and that was in 1998. We started the cyber journey with an intrusion detection system called Dragon, and then in 2002, we started a second company called Tenable Network Security.
And literally, one of the first conferences we went to, we were exhibiting network security wizards at SANS. And I gave Cyndi the basics on what the network IDS kind of did. And literally the first person who came up said, "Hey, how do you handle overlapping fragments to, spoof Linux attacks go into Windows and stuff like that?" So when she says she learned it by osmosis, we've been in this industry for a while. Literally, we were walking around RSA pre-COVID, and we actually ran into one of our NATO customers who recognized Cyndi by her name, and she had cut keys for all these people in the NATO organization who were using the Tenable product. So, Cyndi doesn't do as much talking about herself as I do, but we're very passionate about cybersecurity. We're going to talk about this a bit today. Myself. I'm Ron Gula, Cyndi Gula's husband, and we kind of talk about this as like our Gula Tech Adventures is what we're doing now. It's our third time we're starting a company. Definitely worked at the NSA, worked at the U.S. Air Force, got to be one of the first pen testers at the National Security Agency, started in a whole bunch of different companies, U.S. Internet Networking, one of the first cloud companies, and it goes on and on. We had a great run at Tenable Network Security, which we still run into people who just think it's a great product and a great solution and great company for that. But for the last 3 or 4 years, Cyndi and I have been investing and making grants both with cybersecurity startups, but also cybersecurity nonprofits. And we've spent a lot of time trying to get people into this career field. And we found a couple different things. One, we found that cybersecurity, actually we got the Cartman format with the slides here, cybersecurity, right?
Respect my authority.
It's not inviting. And the cyber industry does such a great job of building this sort of temple of features and products and standards. And you like to talk about this as like yet another thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of yet out there. Anytime you have a product, you have to deploy yet another thing. How do you keep track of that? How does all that data get to where it needs to be? How do you manage it? How do you corral it? How do you even know where it is years after you've collected it? And the data industry, or the data lakes that are out there, has just been creating more and more potential vulnerabilities and attack vectors.
And we've also had an issue where we've actually volunteered, gone into colleges, gone into high schools, and we've talked about cybersecurity, sometimes like in the inner cities, sometimes in like the rural counties. And every time we get the questions, how do I get into cybersecurity? How do I do this? And it's just not very inviting. And we've done such a good job in our industry of taking people who've been successful and sort of making them the example. It's really hard for people to kind of just get started. Everybody wants to know, how do I get started? Any other comments on that, Cyndi?
Yeah, and the other thing that comes about that is we are not selling cybersecurity correctly. When we say cybersecurity, we're not making it a personal impact. Generally, you say cybersecurity, your eyes glaze over, people don't listen. Cybersecurity seems to be somebody else's problem. It's too big, it's too hard. It should be somebody else that's taking care of that. Yet we as an industry don't really invite everybody to come in to understand that, no, they're in the game. This is a game we're all in. We have offense, defense, people play both sides, but we also need referees. We need fans. We need people who understand the game and cheer it on, put money into it, and actually do their part in order to create a better defense for the entire nation and for ourselves.
So I think we've got a couple stories about how cybersecurity is kind of somebody else's is problem. We've seen this a number of times when we've gone out and talked to people who aren't in IT, people who maybe aren't technical. Cybersecurity in many ways is a product. Somebody says, "Do you have cybersecurity?" Well, I've got a firewall. I've got antivirus. Now, you might be thinking, "Hey, I'm in this industry." Nobody thinks that. Well, yes, if for those in the industry, this is true. But for those outside the industry, it really is not that big of a deal. One of the things we've done is we've supported this thing for elections called Defending Digital Campaigns, where we've donated a bit, and I serve on the board there. But what we try to do is bring cyber technology, cyber products, to those running for office, those that are probably the least funded and the least protected from maybe hacking by the Republicans or the Democrats, if you believe that sort of thing, or Russian or Chinese influence, right? You would be stunned how often we talk to a staffer, we talk to an actual candidate, and if they don't come from IT or a business background, you really have to spend a lot of time talking about two-factor authentication, why their website should be protected with something like a Cloudflare, and it takes a lot of time and effort. And the point is, even the lay people think that cybersecurity is not their responsibility; it's somebody else's problem.
Well, in addition, it's a complicated industry to be in. But really the fundamentals, if you boil it down, we can all manage at least a little bit. The pandemic has been a perfect example of the entire communities and world understanding what hygiene actually means and how to wash your hands and do these little steps, social distance. How can we protect ourselves and others that we live around in our community, and how can we do better? We can do the same thing and borrow that from the pandemic area and say, how do we do cyber hygiene? How do we make sure that people understand the basic steps that they can do to protect themselves, and in the digital domain, what they can do?
It's very obvious that we are piling on cybersecurity, but we're going somewhere. We're going to talk about data care in a little bit. But something that's very concerning to Cyndi and I is that the industry has done a poor job of recruiting, call it diverse talent, call it minorities, call it those underrepresented. But there's this flavor that it's a very technical club, it's a very white male type club, and it makes it really difficult to broaden new ideas and actually just populate the workforce. I mean, we have a huge gap. It's not news. We have a huge gap in the amount of people needed to defend the nation in cyberspace. And we're just not doing a great job, articulating why should somebody go into that industry, or even what that industry is. And I think you got a comment or two on that.
Oh, yeah. And so being a woman in cybersecurity, I constantly got asked, how do we get more women in cybersecurity? And I said, stop scaring everybody. Stop making it seem like, oh, here's the entire world, put it on your shoulders, and you alone are going to be walking in your hoodie to solve this problem. That's how we are selling cybersecurity to the public and to the main audience that we're trying to attract. And it's just not working. There's no reason, or it makes complete sense to me, why we're not attracting more people, because the way we sell it is not to the point of come and help in a group, collaborate and fix this problem. We really make it seem like it's an individual problem, that individuals are solving it. And again, it's a lot of burden and complexity that seems it's very unapproachable.
And I think a lot of times when we talk about trying to increase the amount of diversity in cybersecurity, we get down these rat holes because most folks who are in cybersecurity, they're basically engineers. They're very technical, and they want to know, like, okay, like things that are offensive in some ways, like, okay, if I have one more, African American, or if I have an African American and a woman, does that count twice? So the industry has just not done a great job of basically saying, look, you've got to be thoughtful when you go out and recruit people, when you're mentoring people, when you're trying to talk about career paths for people. You need to think about, how do you make it so you get the best that America has to offer, to defend your company, to do your research, to make those things out there. We've just not done a really good job being proactive.
Right. And there's that proactiveness, but there's also the messaging, because we need so many different trains of thoughts and ways to think about how to attack this issue, that we're not looking beyond what we know. We tend to hire people we know. We tend to hire other people that suggest people, because that trust is so necessary. And you have to have the trust. You have to have the drive. You have to have the desire. And when you put all of those things together, we can certainly bring more people in. But cybersecurity is not just the coders. It's not just the developers. We've got people who have to be art and marketing and visualize this really difficult technology into a way people understand it. We need technical writers. We need people who are really great in English to be able to get those complicated ideas into a workable form. We also need salespeople. I mean, I consider the salespeople educators more than anything else. They need to pitch and understand why cybersecurity is very important, but they need to convince others as to why it is too.
And a certain percentage of the audience just threw up a little bit when you said that, but that's fine.
So it's not necessarily those code writers, developers, but people who understand the logistics. They can architect, they can figure out how it goes together. And then on top of all of that, we need people who really think about the policies, regulation, and how those should be written in a way that they protect our information.
And a lot of times, Cyndi and I will get the chance to go and sort of tell the Tenable story to inspire, kids, college students to want to join cybersecurity. And as Cyndi just said, Tenable is as technically advanced as a company that is. Not everybody there's a programmer. Not everybody there is an offensive vulnerability reverse engineer, right? We've got a lot of different folks. So when somebody says, "How do I get into cybersecurity?" Just as an industry, we have really let Hollywood and the politicians define what our industry is, and we have not defined. I mean, everybody knows the difference between a paramedic and a nurse and a doctor, right? And if you have like gender associated with that, shame on you, right? But everybody knows what that is. Outside of cybersecurity, nobody really knows what a reverse engineer is, or a penetration tester, or a compliance auditor, or a field security officer is. I mean, there's so many different things we could have been doing to make this a little bit better. All right, well, so we're almost done piling on the industry that's been so good to the Gulas here, but we want to help and make it even better. So a little bit more on what we were saying before is just cybersecurity has failed to inspire responsibility for the average person. They really do not know how to navigate issues about privacy, about personal responsibility for their data, or even about how they should take care of customers. There's no sort of muscle memory there. There's no sort of like home ec course that we went through. We talked about how banking worked, how credit cards work. Well, here's how social media works. Here's how phones, you could actually lose your phone. You could get blackmailed. You could get revenge porn. You can get all these different things that are happening now. We've not done a whole lot of that. And because of that, there's no responsibility that the general public has.
And there's also all these free apps from a point of view of what does free mean? And quite honestly, there's not a free. So I think the time is really good as people are starting to realize, wait a minute, somebody's using that data. And my concern is not necessarily just the data today, but it's that data tomorrow. How are we going to maintain the integrity of that data so that it's not weaponized and potentially used against us in the future? It could be used against us monetarily. It could be used against us politically. It could be used against us in various different ways. And we need to understand that if this data is out there, where is it, who owns it, and who's responsible for it? And how do we as an industry determine that?
All right. So like I said, we want to help fix this. And we were very purposeful about trying to pick these two things. Like, how can we get personal responsibility in the general public? And how can we be more inviting to the general public to join this career field? So we think calling it data care and being very, very purposeful about stealing from the healthcare industry with analogies that everybody really understands is a good way to do this. Now, Cyndi, I think you want to talk. Sorry, we were having coffee one morning, and
yeah,
there you go.
I really started thinking about how healthcare has been able to make health personal and been able to grow into wellness and into a preventative state, and to really be able to capture people to understand that their health is their responsibility and they can participate in a way that makes everybody's community better. And if you get ahead of all of, let's say, cancer, it's easier to treat. If you get ahead of, again, brushing your teeth, hopefully your teeth don't fall out, and all that. So we've learned hundreds and hundreds of years. But when we were growing up, it wasn't even called healthcare. That's a relatively new term as well. It was called medical field. Would you like to go into the medical field? And that messaging is kind of similar to the cybersecurity. It's somebody else's problem. What you're saying is, do you want to study really, really hard, become an expert, become a doctor? That's what that meant. And we need to figure out how to get people into that entry level. How do we get them into the EMT? Most people know first aid. So in the event that you have an accident, you can at least apply first aid until you get to more of an expert place that they can help you out. So that's where I was like, you know what? We have all these hundreds of years of healthcare. Why don't we learn from that? Because there are so many parallels between healthcare and data care. We have the way you talk to different populations. We have geriatrics, we have pediatrics, we have specialists. If you have, like I said, if you have cancer, you go to specialists. If I have something wrong with my foot, I don't go see an eye doctor. So what can we do, and how can we communicate, I guess, is the best way to the public in a way that they can hear, and making it personal. If it's your data, you're going to be more interested in protecting it. And when we talk about protecting data as regulation, it's a lot easier to talk about the regulations around the data than the technology. The technology is moving so fast that we are not able to really keep up with the potential and the possibility that the innovation is going to give us. So how do we leverage this beautiful thing of the internet, and how we can communicate with each other, and how we transact, and how all the different things that we can do? But if we focus on the data and we really boil it down to that, now we can make it personal, and now we can help the public understand that they have a responsibility for it, and they can play a significant role in how cybersecurity and protection and defense of the country.
And this is not the first time I've gone through sort of a rebranding of our industry. So in the mid 90s, you could say I'm in information security, I'm in IT security. The military played around with, I'm an information warfare expert, I'm an information warfare operator.
Assurance.
We had assurance, we had all these different CNO, CXO, all these different things. And you know what, people outside of that, even people inside of it, I think they kind of nodded along, right? So this is not the first time. Once we started saying cyber, that's good. Cybersecurity is more accurate, but now we got the problem of things like Cyber Monday, right?
Yeah. So you ask the general public, is Amazon a cyber company? And people in the industry would kind of look and think, and you kind of see the wheels turning. But you have to understand, the public has Cyber Monday. Of course, Amazon's a cyber company, because that's where I go to buy my stuff on Cyber Monday. So really, what does cyber mean? And then you pile on, what does cybersecurity mean? And it just becomes this rolling away from the public and not embracing that there's something that they have to play in defending their data.
So let's start talking about data care. One of the main things we want to do with this messaging is make it personal. we want people who are outside of the cybersecurity industry to have that responsibility of protecting their data. And I've actually had a lot of opportunities to kind of A/B test this with different types of students and small business, and we'll get into that in a little bit more here. But if you ask somebody, how are they protecting their home network? How are they protecting their small business in cyberspace? They're going to probably tell you that they've got an IT practitioner, a firewall, a product, a VPN, that sort of thing. And that's good. That's always good if they answer like that. But you want to get them thinking, well, how do you personally care for your data? How do you protect your data? Even know what that data is. So calling this industry data care really inspires a little bit more responsibility for other folks who are not necessarily doing this on a day-to-day basis. And Cyndi, you've had the chance to actually do this in front of a live audience with a real estate cybersecurity conference.
Yeah, it's always really interesting to go into industries that are not cybersecurity to talk about cybersecurity, because you learn so much. You learn just the basics. At this conference, we were talking about two-factor authentication. And somebody says, that's great. How does my assistant get my two-factor authentication to log in to my account? And we were just stunned to realize that is their reality. They figured out a way to work that was not secure. But again, I'm not sure that they really had people in our industry going and talking to them and talking through the importance of making sure there's solutions for those problems, and they're just not addressing them.
So from a small business point of view, we always talk about the lack of underinvesting in cybersecurity. But one of the big reasons there's this lack of an underinvesting is there's not this sort of predominant responsibility in a lot of small business. And I don't want to be stereotypical, but if you're a pizza shop, your job is to make great pizzas, not necessarily protect the data from your customers who are, buying data with OpenTable or with credit card, or sharing your Wi-Fi that might have somebody eavesdropping on it and whatnot. And that's where we got to get people kind of thinking about. We talk about personal security. We talk about, the need to use two-factor authentication, cyber hygiene. But again, we're missing sort of that basic education about cybersecurity. And even social media. When we talk about, Facebook, and are you sharing too much on Facebook? Are you putting too much on Twitter? Are you putting too much information out there? A lot of times people who don't understand the risk, they don't have the context to even have that kind of conversation. And it's certainly not a cybersecurity product. Like, there's no antivirus you use to protect yourself from disinformation on Facebook. So calling this data care makes it a little bit more responsible and have people understand that they've got a role to play with the management of their data.
And it really brings in big tech and the likes of the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Twitter, and the people who have your data that are not cybersecurity companies. And how do we make sure that we cover them in the idea that you personally have a say in demanding what they do with your data, that it's the ownership. It's if you give the data out there, who owns that data? And when you talk from a point of view of its data care, the conversation gets a lot easier than if it was, oh, now I'm talking about Facebook, and now how do they govern and how do they protect my data? And it is a difficult solution to talk about. However, if you turn it around and you say, that's my data, what are you doing to protect my data? The conversation becomes a lot easier.
So another aspect of data care is making it more easy to recruit for, let alone select slides for. And when I say it's easy to recruit for, Cyndi and I have both had the opportunity to go in to speak at job fairs, both at the high school level, stuff for the government, and it's a difficult thing to communicate. What does it mean to be a cybersecurity expert? And the data care industry is, when you talk about it in terms like that, it's a little bit more, well, it's less intimidating is the word I'm looking for. Because with cybersecurity, if I'm going to show you examples of cybersecurity, It's sort of like showing fighter pilots for the Air Force, right? Or submariners, for the Navy, or, maybe like people who drive tanks or Apache helicopters for the Army. It's the tip of the spear that kind of gets everything, but there's not a lot that our industry has done to show about all the different things that go behind that. And by talking about it with data care, again, we're stealing from healthcare, but we're trying to, get people to instantly understand that we're all not brain surgeons. There's a lot of ways you can land in this career field and be very, very successful.
Yeah, our director of engineering at Tenable was a finance degree, and he was in finance, and he understood as he was using the tools that he was missing out on monitoring, and he was missing out on a couple other things. So he decided to self-learn and teach himself how to look at some of those things, and it made it personal for him. And he then just kept training himself. He looked up, he did a lot of research, and he was able to become this fantastic coder, even though he never went to school to code. And that's one of the beauties of cybersecurity. Unlike being a doctor, you can't just start as an EMT and then grow your way in the industry to become a doctor. You have to go to school. You have to do all these other types of certifications. Well, in cybersecurity, you actually have that availability to do the self-taught, learn, grow, work experience that grows you into a cyber expert without taking extra courses or that. But you have to really, find your passion, because there's so many different ways to get into it. You might really like the forensics part of it. You might like the defending, the protecting, creating the fences, or you might like to be able to see them monitor and look around the corners, so to speak, to figure out how they're accessing or how somebody could access a network. So there's a wide variety of ways to enter into the cyber field.
So another way to look at this as far as recruiting folks is that many of the entry-level jobs are high paying compared to other, what I would consider, 2-year degree, certification degree type thing. There's a lot to be said for joining this career. And the job titles, right? IT help desk, basically, server administrator, provisioning Active Directory. A lot of those people do not feel like they are part of the cybersecurity industry. And they kind of feel left out a little bit. And I experienced this a lot when I was in the Air Force, right? The Air Force is so big and has so many different roles. Where is the Air Force at? Is it at the center of the Pentagon? Is it a nuclear missile silo in the Midwest somewhere? Is it in the cockpit of a B-2 bomber? It's the same thing with our cybersecurity industry. We've done such a good job of sort of elevating our experts and made people, just inundated with information. People who are doing, I'm not going to say, less sophisticated. Well, I guess less sophisticated operator. So they don't feel like they're part of the industry, and they absolutely are. And because of that, there's this identity problem where it says, hey, I want you to come work on my help desk. That's not a good way to pitch that, right? Because if you talk about how important these jobs are to make sure IT that runs well, not only are you going to be able to get people in a career where they can get a good job, good wage, they can actually make a difference defending the intellectual property and the networks where they actually work at.
And accessibility is huge. From a point of view of being able to use anything, it needs to be accessible. And the accessibility really comes from the IT area, how people operate the security products, because if they tie them down too much, then they're not usable. But if they release them give too much leeway, then there's potential attack vectors. And that's why you have to measure that risk. And when you become really good at measuring and discerning risk, being able to articulate that to others is very important. And again, it's not coding. It's not that idea that you have to be that expert. But if you understand that network, that's invaluable. And it's what everybody in the industry needs.
So another thing DataCare does is it makes it less intimidating to those that are underrepresented. And again, we kind of talked about women, African Americans, just anybody who's not somebody who looks like me. White male for those who are listening on a podcast or not on the video here. But the point of view that we have is that not only is the term cybersecurity synonymous with and being an expert, but it's also synonymous with kind of being white male. And the industry's made great strides these last probably 5 years. My mentor from NSA was a woman, Becky, God rest your soul. But for the most everybody else, they're looking at this field and they're saying, wow, not only do I have to compete and become an expert, but I've got to kind of also, work twice as hard because I'm a woman, because I'm a Black man, because I'm whatever minority that you want to look at. And we often focus on, women and African Americans, but it could be rural schools. If you were raised in a K through 12 that didn't have, donations from Microsoft or Google in New York City, you might be touching a computer programming class, your first time when you get to college. You might be behind learning these kind of skills. So we think the term data care, and again, embracing all of those entry level jobs, all of those very, very important jobs, is something that can be done to kind of increase more diversity and engagement with this, with this entire community.
In addition, I think one of the benefits that we get from data care is the idea that you can protect data of people that your family, small companies. You can make it as small and personal as you want. Or if you look at the certifications that are out there and the job and careers that are out there, you can want to target mid-sized companies that you get to learn the lower stack and the upper stack, but you can participate but not be ultimately responsible. Or you can target to work for really large organizations where you're doing a very focused and narrow job and being really, really good at that job. So again, the underrepresented community might think that cybersecurity is only a large company that you're going to be, putting that entire world on your own shoulders in a hoodie working by yourself. But the reality is everything is very collaborative. The creators need the operators' input. The operators' input to the user interfaces. The user interfaces go for what actually needs to be reported, potentially even regulations and how to make that streamlined and easier. So again, as an industry, if we say data care, you kind of come in at a little bit different of an angle with how big or what is your passion? Do I want to stay small and really work on that small real estate company that I work for and deal with that data? Do I want to deal with the data, the finance, maybe the local credit union? Do I want to go to a Citibank and work on defending that type of data? Or do I even want to go over to the federal government and be able to work in that arena where there's not a lot of commercial play? You get access to a lot of very interesting technology when you're in the military.
All right, so we're going to finish up here with what we can do. What can you do specifically? If you're redrafting your LinkedIn profile right now, saying you're a master of the data care industry, then God bless you, right? That's good. What we really want people to do is to just speak broader about this particular problem. We're spending a lot of time doing talks like this, which is actually very difficult to do in front of a non-interactive audience, mind you, but it's more fun to interact with your wife sitting aside from you. But having said that, we're hoping that these sort of anecdotes is going to give you some ideas and, courage to kind of share to non-cyber people. The cyber industry has done such a great job of talking to other people in the cybersecurity industry. We need to kind of reach out. And if calling it data care inspires more people to do that, then so be it.
And also having a conversation, making your own arguments of how cyber is similar to healthcare. And again, one thing with healthcare, they're really good at our health, our physical body, and making sure that we are well. But we are now putting on top of the healthcare all of this responsibility to care for our data. Well, is that their responsibility, or could we say more from an industry point of view, that's the data care industry, and those experts can now really go in and protect that data. It is working that way. I don't want anybody to think that it's not working that way, but I don't want a doctor to be necessarily an expert in protecting my data. I want them to be an expert at fixing my heart if that's a problem, or my eyes. So where we can leverage the expertise and put an umbrella with a statement and understanding that it's not a single thing, that it's very broad, that we can go across many different industries with respect to the expertise being in the data care, necessarily not all-encompassing expert in everything in your industry.
Click, click. Great. So more things you can take away from this. So, be purposeful with engaging minorities. And this is an interesting topic these days, because it's so hard to kind of know when you're doing enough or not doing enough. People feel very emotional about these things. And so you got to be purposeful. But I give a lot of advice to folks that we invest in and nonprofits. And I say, you got to pick your passion, right? So if you happen to be in a place where you can have a lot of impact with African American communities, Black communities, Hispanic communities, whatever your local geography is. Yeah, I mean, you play the hand you're dealt with where you think you can make the most impact. We've spent some time with lots of different nonprofits, and we've encountered the sort of the martyr syndrome, where the nonprofit is going to work, 60 hours a week on their passion, which could be African American women. It could be refugees from for Eastern Europe, Middle East. There's so many different things you can do. I'm just going to tell you, you can't do everything. But anything you can do is helpful, and you should be good. And don't feel judged. Like if somebody says, look, you should have given more, you should have spent more time, maybe you're volunteering at a K through 12 school and you can only come in once a month. Maybe it'd be great if you came in twice a month, but at least you're volunteering, right? So don't feel, we need more people giving, not more people telling people to give more. Having said that, you got to be purposeful, and if you're in a place where you can go and introduce yourself to different programs, whether it's the public school system, different types of colleges that might have certain ethnicities, or even all girls schools, all men's schools, all women's schools, right? Yeah. That kind of thing, right?
Well, you have to hear the issues. What are they missing in order to fill in the blanks? A lot of times we think everybody hears everything that has been said at cybersecurity and that we don't need to keep repeating it. Whereas when you talk to people, you understand where they're coming from, what their perspective is, and you're able to help more because you can fill in those blanks. Whereas a lot of times there's an assumption that everybody knows what you know, and that's really not going to get us anywhere as a society.
And make sure if you're engaging folks who aren't white males, that you're not just teaching them how cybersecurity works and how compliance works. You need to teach them to recruit other people for their background. And that's probably the biggest mistake I think we've done as an industry, is we've taught a few people to learn TCP/IP and firewalls and policy and compliance, but we haven't taught those people how to be leaders and recruit their next generation. So remember your audience. Cyndi's story about the two-factor authentication at the real estate conference. The big thing there is it wasn't judgmental. And frankly, I think if I was the one making that point, I don't know that as a white male, most women would come up. Well, maybe they would, but I think it's useful to have folks who kind of look the same sometimes, because not only I'm going to go back to that cybersecurity is really good about putting experts on a pedestal. It doesn't play well with the general public, right? So just make sure to remember your audience. There's no dumb questions, but there's probably a lot of intimidation with people even wanting to ask you these questions, because you're bringing a lot of knowledge and expertise to the table. You want to make sure that you can share that in a way that's going to be heard. Keep it personal. Keep data care very personal, and try to make little impacts. My experience at Defending Digital Campaigns, boy, I wish I could have put out the entire NIST cybersecurity framework with every campaign. Some of these campaigns have like their kids doing their IT for them, right? That's not going to happen. You got to make your wins where you can get your wins. If you can get two-factor authentication out there, they're better off than just with passwords, right? So go from there.
And the final thing is, remember the why. The best question is why if somebody asks you why you're in cybersecurity, you really need to make sure you can articulate the why. And one thing I got asked is, what is the best thing about cybersecurity? And I really say it's the people. The people, we might be competing, we might be on different sides of a company or anything else like that, but we're all on the same team. When it comes to the end of the day, we're all on defending the country. So we really all have a passion for this defense and the idea of security, but and vehemently passionate about protecting your data. And you just need to make sure when you're asking somebody about why they're in cybersecurity, that's a good question. But also when you're telling people, tell them it's the passion. Why are you doing it? Why do you work for a large company? Why do you work for a small company? Why do you work offense? Why do you work defense? Why do you like forensics? So again, remember that why. It's very important.
So just to finish up, congratulations, Security Weekly, on your anniversary, and happy December 10th to everybody here. Hopefully the holiday season is going to treat everybody well. If you want to learn more, don't go to www.gula.te, right? So we're gula.tech, TECH, and we have a lot of information up there about the things Cyndi and I are working on. All the cybersecurity nonprofits that we're associated with, all the great cyber companies that we're associated with. And we're happy to be helping out. And we've written a lot about data care, and we put up videos and different types of papers on this. So if you want to learn more, feel free to hit us out there. Cyndi and I are both on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with us up there if that's your thing. If you're on Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that, we show up there occasionally, but not as much as these days. Anything else?
No, I think that's about it.
Are you in the data care, Cyndi?
I am in the data care industry.
I am in the data care industry as well. Thank you. Have a great conference. Enjoy the rest of your day.